Welcome to episode 27 of the AskJV show. Today we are talking about my rig. I go in depth about, why I chose Pro Tools, why I still use it, and what my rig has looked like through the years. Also talking about room mics and miking guitar cabs. Let's get into it.
3, 2, 1. This is the AskJV show.
Our first question comes from Jerry. You mentioned upgrading your DAW. What does the HD system have to warrant the extra cost compared to non-HD? Avid's pricing seems to lock you into perpetually buying if you want to have any support from them. What are your feelings on this pricing approach? What led you to use Pro Tools? I realize that most pro studios have Pro Tools, but do you see studios changing to other systems simply because of the cost?
Hey Jerry, these are cool questions. Let me get in depth in this. Okay, so I started on Pro Tools for a few reasons. Number one, when I took over the studio of a guy who was selling all of his stuff, he was on Pro Tools. So instantly that was the first DAW I ever used. Well, I guess before that I had used some, free stuff or whatever, but nothing serious. So Pro Tools was really the first professional good DAW I used, but that was just Pro Tools LE, like version 6 or something. And I quickly discovered that Pro Tools was the industry standard. I believe it still is, even though that's kind of changing now with a lot of different DAWs competing. It's definitely more diverse than it was. That was maybe almost 10 years. Well, yeah, it was 10 years ago when I first started, just at total amateur level. So back then, it definitely was Pro Tools. That was the thing. So anyone else that was recording relatively seriously was definitely Pro Tools. And even today, even though in the home studio world and maybe even kind of the project studio, even decent like producers are spread out now across different DAWs, I would still say when it comes to bigger studios, more established studios, kind of people who have been in the game for a longer time, Pro Tools is still the standard. And it's just, I think it's going to take time for that to change if it does. Even though Avid has screwed up a lot of things in terms of customer relations and everything, it's still the standard because once you're working professionally and in a flow with a certain piece of equipment, especially software, it's really hard to change. I mean, I definitely got frustrated with Pro Tools at different points, and I tried out Logic, I tried out other DAWs very briefly, and nothing against them. I don't know enough about them to comment, but it's basically just like, there's no way I'm going to put myself back at square one and learn a new DAW from scratch. It's just way too frustrating, way too painful for me. I want to stick with what I know. I've been using Pro Tools since the start, so I can go about it with my eyes closed. So I don't really see myself changing from that unless something goes really wrong with the software. But so that's where I started, where I'm at now. Now, you said I mentioned upgrading. Well, I updated, maybe is a better word, to Pro Tools 12, it's fully native. Prior to that, I was using Pro Tools HD, and I did buy that the first year I went full-time in my studio, and it was quite expensive. I'd say it was almost $10,000 all in, with the interface and the cards that go on the computer and all that stuff. So certainly expensive, a little overpriced. Maybe I should have bought it used. But here's the thing, I needed some of the features that they had. So obviously just bigger track counts, and I needed the reliability. So before I bought HD, I had interned / been an assistant at a studio in Toronto. It was a big studio, and they had a big HD system in both rooms. And I just noticed how rock solid it was, and there was never any hiccups or issues, and there was nothing that was off limits. You could do anything. Back then, I couldn't even have multi-track beat detective with Pro Tools LE. So just that alone was a big thing. And with the amount of bands I was recording and how every one of them needed drum editing, even that was almost worth the cost in a way. But there's so many other things, especially working with clients too, especially as you're progressing higher up, like you can't be fighting with your platform, and it's worth the investment to make sure that's rock solid. You need to be able to give them their own headphone mix easily without messing up your system. You need to be able to have no latency as you're monitoring, as you're recording. Like, there's just a certain level of professionalism that you need when you're recording bands. So that's why I went for HD, and I think it paid off. It allowed me to work faster. I took out a whole bunch of roadblocks that were in my way before, and I think it was definitely a worthwhile investment. And I used that HD system for a long, long time, up to 10 years. I mean, just this year, I switched over to Pro Tools 12 for mixing, but I still have my HD rig here because I need to recall some mixes every now and then. Even this week, a client from a couple of years ago wanted some stems from a project we did, so I've got to boot up that old system, which is fine. But it's still, even to this day, I bought the HD system in 07, I think, or 08. And 8 years later, it can still handle anything. So that's a little info about HD. Like I said, I'm going in depth on this one. But yeah, my new rig, I did not upgrade to the HD. The price is just too crazy. I mean, if I was running a bigger studio with clients recording all the time, I would definitely go for the HD rig still. But that's just not where I'm at right now. I just mix out of my little mix room here at home. So I didn't need the HD system anymore. So I decided to try a fully native mix rig with Pro Tools 12, and it's been going great. So that's just where I'm at now. So I hope that answers your questions and is just some helpful info on kind of the different rigs I've had through the years and why.
Here's our next question. I want to know if you use mics which point into the room on drums instead of trying to record them dry and add reverb later, or even in acoustic sessions on guitar.
Yeah, drum room mics are definitely essential for me. I'll always set them up. Even if it's a small room that doesn't have much ambience, I'll still try to get something cool out of it. If it doesn't work out, if the room mics end up sounding bad in the mix, I'll just use reverb instead. But for the most part, I try to get my ambience from the drum kit from actual room mics. You said in your question, you asked if I had mics pointing into the room. No, I think what you meant though is just room mics in general for drums. I still have my room mics pointed at my drums, but they'll just be, back from the kit. For acoustic guitars, I have done that. In the studio I used to record out of a lot. It was a pretty small live room and it didn't sound good for acoustic guitars, so I always just close mic'd it and kind of just stopped recording room mics for acoustics after a while, just because it never was that great. But definitely in bigger studios with really nice sounding rooms, it can be nice to have an ambient pair of mics in the room for acoustic guitars, and especially maybe it's even more common for me is if I want it to sound cool or sound unique in a certain way, and maybe there's a big concrete room in the studio or something and it has like a really kind of unique ambient sound, then I'll definitely go for some room mics in there for acoustic guitars.
Here's our last question for this week. I was wondering, how do you usually mic electric guitars? I like the tone you get for them. Do you use a regular 57 or do you use any sort of mic combinations? Do you just place the mic in front of the cab or do you leave some air distance? Let's say 2 to 3 inches away from the cab?
Yeah, for the most part, I'm a less is more kind of guy. So when miking guitar cabs, for probably 90% of the work that you've heard from me, it's been just a single SM57 on the cab, just in a good spot. And I pretty much always used the cab that I owned at my studio. It had 2 V30 speakers in it, and I just knew the speakers really well, and I knew where to put the mic over time. So, but yeah, generally I'd have the 57. I'd start with it right up on the grill pretty much, maybe like this far away, right where the center of the speaker meets the cone, kind of at the edge there. I'd start there, and then just hear how it sounds through the speakers. And if it was too bright, I'd move it one way. If it was too dark, I'd move it the other way. If there was too much bass build up on chugs and stuff, I'd move it back from the grill. So yeah, occasionally I'd end up with it back, a couple inches, probably not more than, like you said, 2-3 inches. Usually I try to keep it pretty close. And yeah, that was pretty much my approach for miking guitar cabs. Occasionally throughout my career, I have used multiple mic combinations. A really popular and good one is SM57 paired with a Royer ribbon mic right beside it. That's a pretty great combo too. I just started finding I was just as happy with just the 57 too. So yeah, that's kind of what I always went back to. I actually bought a Royer ribbon mic for guitar cabs, and I used that for a while, blended with the 57, and it was good to add some low mid and some thickness to it. But in the end, I found I could do without it. I sold that mic. I ended up getting it again later on because I wanted to try it again, and it did work well for some projects, but did away with it again, sold it a second time. I'd say if you're doing more kind of just straight up rock stuff, having that ribbon mic blended with the 57 can really be useful. But I was doing mostly, more aggressive stuff on the metal side, and I was totally happy with just the SM57. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching as always. If you've got questions you want answered by me on this show, submit them at AskJVPod.com or leave a comment here. We try to collect them from everywhere, but AskJVPod.com is the best place to submit your questions. We'll try to get to them on the show here. Lots of fun doing it as usual. If you're not on my email list, definitely go to hardcoremusicstudio.com, sign up for the free mixing cheat sheet, and then you'll get a series of emails with a lot of free content, some great mixing tutorial videos, etc. It's the best place to get all the best content there. So thanks for following along. Definitely subscribe on YouTube or on iTunes, and leave us a review if you don't mind on iTunes. That would help us reach more people. And yeah, submit your questions. And if you've got any suggestions too for the show, I'd love to hear it. Maybe some guests you want me to try and interview or stuff like that. So again, just get in touch, AskJVPod.com. All right, that's it for this week. See you next time.